And I'm going to turn off my video. And I'm going to go ahead and start the webinar. Everybody ready?
Yep.
All right. And you're live.
Excellent. Thank you all for joining us for this, I would say, dynamic panel discussion. I want to first thank the Carlson Center, the College of Education, and the Doctorate in Education and Leadership program for sponsoring this event. Now, as we engage in conversation, please feel free to engage the chat option and include, your sentiments, statements, your thoughts, questions that you might have, and I'll try to do my best to multitask, although I can't guarantee that I'll be successful. But I have Parker here in the corner. I'm sure that can remind me when questions are posed. I'm excited about this presentation. Right, the panel discussion focuses on I would say a very timely topic: equity, entrepreneurship, and innovation in Sacramento and the broader region. And why is this topic timely? Well, I would say due to the protests of 2020 relating to racial equity and social justice, calls are growing wide and vast for the dismantling, I would say, of educational systems, economic structures that favor those with wealth or racial privilege. Demands for organizations to foster an equitable, diverse workplace is being advanced and demanded. So how do we take full advantage of equity, entrepreneurship, and innovation? I would say that in order to advance these three important values that ultimately make allowance to converge, we need a diverse workforce, not only in terms of recruiting, but also the retention and success of a diverse workforce. And so why is this important? Well, we all know this, the benefits, undisputable, the benefits are many. When we do foster a workplace that is diverse. And I'll just mention a few of the benefits: expanded creativity and problem solving, better decision-making, increased profits and productivity. And a lot of this has to do to what they bring to the table, to the organization, and that is different experiences, skills, and just perspectives, right? Based on the varied experiences, diverse experience that they grew up with. So those are assets that allow us to accrue the benefits I just mentioned. It also enhances the reputation of the organization, of the institution. When an organization promotes diversity, they're perceived as more relatable, more socially responsible, and more humane, I would say. And it also, I would say, enhances employee engagement and retention. Employees often feel more comfortable, happier, and inclusive environments, right? The sense of being, the sense of belongingness, the sense that that they're part of a systemic system that allows for their values, their thoughts, their cultures, their norms to be included within the everyday practices, I would say, of an organization and institution. So what we have here is I would say three dynamic, outstanding individuals that make this panel. The panelists will discuss how efforts to institutionalize diversity, equity, and inclusive practices can support innovation and entrepreneurship. The three members of this panel that make up this panel are as follows. We have Dr. Adrienne Lawson. She is the Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Compliance at Pride Industries. She's actually, on a personal note, she's one of my advisees from cohort 1. We're just discussing that. So always good to see you, Dr. Lawson. We have Sean De Vera, Director of Education at Square Root Academy. He's currently in the second year of the doctoral program. And then we have Dr. Samir Batarsi. He was part of an alumni of the program. He was part of cohort 5. He's Chief of Data and Geospatial Management Branch at Caltrans. So I prepared three questions that will allow us to facilitate discussion. I'll present the first question, then I'll make allowance for the panelists to engage that particular question. So the first question is as follows. What is the intersection between equity and entrepreneurship? So what do we mean by this question? Let me kind of discern it a little more. How do these two values complement each other? How do organizations benefit when convergence takes place between equity and entrepreneurship? Because we know they go hand in hand and they complement each other. So let's make allowance here for Dr. Lawson to engage that particular question. Dr. Lawson?
Sure. I guess first I want to make sure that we have an understanding of intersectionality and equity. Intersectionality is an analytical framework for understanding how aspects of persons' social and political identities combine to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. So the term was conceptualized and coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in a paper in 1989. So intersectionality identifies multiple factors of advantage and disadvantage. And we see this in our workplaces today. We see this with entrepreneurs today. So some examples of factors of intersectionality is genders, sex, race, class, sexuality, religion, disability, physical appearance, and even height. We have a lot of research on that, right? These intersections overlap social identities, and they can be both empowering as well as oppressing. For example, as a Black woman, I might face discrimination from a business that is not distinctly due to my race, nor distinctly due to my gender, but due to a combination of the two factors. So when I think about equity, equity really recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. And that's not necessarily so in our society today as entrepreneurs. So you have those who are more privileged to grants and loans as far as their businesses are concerned. And then you have those that may not receive those grants or loans for their businesses, depending on their intersectionality. So as a Black woman, I may even feel a little odd going into a bank because I feel that I may be discriminated against because, for one, I'm a woman, I'm an African-American Black woman. And so when I think about that intersectionality of being an entrepreneur, which I actually am an entrepreneur as well, I do consulting work. When I think about that and I think about equity, I wonder about the advantages that I have. I have a lot of advantages because I have a doctorate degree. So I do have some privilege and some advantages. But then on the flip side of that, some people don't value that. They just look at me as, you're a woman, you may be more of a risk than an asset. So I may not get that small business loan as perhaps a white male, or even maybe a male that's Latina, but it's just the simple fact that you're a male, right? So when I think about intersectionality and entrepreneurship, that's what I think about.
Excellent. Sean?
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Sean. I'm the Director of Education at Square Root Academy. I want to give maybe a little bit of background on what my professional journey has been like, so that the context of my answer makes sense to you all. First of all, thank you, Dr. Lawson, for coming in with your insight about intersectionality. So for me, my professional background was I was a math teacher. I was a math teacher for 15 years, a high school math teacher. I'm currently now directing educational programs for a community-based organization in Sacramento. We're a nonprofit, so that's going to be an interesting term to put adjacent to talk about entrepreneurship, and I'll talk about what I think about that in a second. And so the we started 5 years ago. I joined in April. Our mission is to work with youth who are in grades 5 through 12 and work with them to deliver what we call transformative experiences in STEAM. STEAM being science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. We do this through a series of after-school workshops. We do this through programs that happen on weekends and events. So I'm coming to answering the question, what's the intersection between equity and entrepreneurship? I believe that in my experiences, even though the definition of entrepreneurs are those who invest financial risk and start businesses and start a venture, I would say that there's an analogy in that with teachers who are on the ground, who are investing often times resources of time and energy, and a lot of times their own material and purchases to really promote equity in classrooms across the country. A lot of teachers who come into the profession, ultimately, I believe, have a goal, especially in the context that I've worked with, to, really make sure that, education is as much as possible that mechanism to, give opportunity, even though we know that sometimes has its challenges and its flaws. When we transfer to an organization like Spirit Academy, which, credit where credit is due, I was not the, founding entrepreneur. It was a gentleman named Nick Hastings, who is actually an alumni of Sac State. He was an engineer. He was an engineer who went into industry and identified as an African-American male, and did not see a lot of people who looked like him, a lot of people who are often characterized by the acronym BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color, in that field. And ultimately, for him, I believe that his intersection between equity and entrepreneurship was to create an organization to really promote that with our youth, in the hopes that we create a workforce that is more representative of all the genius that is there. And so that is my first thoughts on that. And yeah.
Thank you, Sean. Dr. Batarsi.
Thanks, Dr. Navarez. Just to give you some background on me, I just started public service a few months ago. I retired from Intel Corporation. So spent 22 years in the high-tech industry. So this topic is near and dear to my heart when we talk about equity and innovations. So as a typical engineer, I want to share one slide to show some numbers to basically zoom in on the problem statement before we start talking about the gaps. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
So I want just to reflect on, and these are from the census and from Zippa.com, where they follow entrepreneurship's numbers, and just so I want to show you the gaps, whether it's their overrepresentation and underrepresentation. I know Dr. Lawson talks about intersectionality, and sometimes even if the opportunity was given, the lack of skill set to take advantage of that opportunity. And this is what I want to talk about in the high tech sector, and there's a lot of opportunities. But I think as an educator and as a business person, as a public servant, it's important to point out that in order to overcome these gaps, and you could see the gaps are loud and clear in terms of underrepresentation from different ethnic backgrounds. What I want to talk about, well, build on what Dr. Navarez talked about, the importance of diversity, especially in innovation. Not only you're getting diverse thoughts when we talk about equity, but the way you approach a for-profit, not Sean's organizations, but the for-profit organizations, is to come in with a value add. This is why diversity is important to you. And I think Dr. Navarez touched upon it by saying, increased sales. And I want to go at the next level, with the supply chain issues and the global need for, expanding and penetrating new markets. We can sell this idea based on enhancing global presence, expanding your market, doubling your sources of revenue. And this is when companies started listening. Sometimes the logical or the ethical argument might not be enough. So you got to kind of have a hybrid approach in terms of this is what's going to work. It's a value proposition that it's a win-win for you and for different people from the underrepresented, disproportionately underrepresented groups. So another thing that comes to mind, and Dr. Lawson mentioned the intersectionality. One thing that came to mind for my dissertation is not just giving the opportunity, but also providing the skill set. You can't send somebody to build a house without the right tools. You can walk into the SBA and ask for a business loan if you have a good idea, but until you have the skills to write an effective business plan, where you can convince that SBA loan officer, or you can walk into Cisco, Intel, Google, or Instagram or Facebook and tell them, I got a great idea that can enhance your business. I think that's where we have to work on as educators and as business people, and that brings in the theories by Pierre Bourdieu, the social and cultural capital, which means sometimes you can give access to the financial capital for people to bridge that gap. But unless you give them the social and cultural capital, take away the imposter syndrome and make people believe that they can do it and give them the tools and skill set to do it. One more thing, I know I'm taking a lot of time, but a very important thing, the importance of innovation and entrepreneurship to bridge the gap we're looking at on the screen. I think it takes people from just getting a job to pay the bills into a position where they can build wealth for generations to come, and bridging that social and cultural gap, and getting that status that has influence in terms of voting, in terms of purchasing power, in terms of deciding on their what happens in their neighborhoods, in terms of services, and in terms of access to healthcare and retail and education and all the other services that they need.
Excellent. Thank you. Rich discussion on this first question, and let me try to summarize and synthesize the major values that came out of your answers to this particular question. I probably won't do justice, but I'll give it a shot. Dr. Lawson talked about identifying multiple social identities, right? Realizing privileges and disadvantages that one has depending on the intersectionalities of identities in light of economic advantages and disadvantages, and having a higher consciousness about that and using that for success. Sean talked about the power of education as a mechanism to providing opportunities and advancing equities and entrepreneurships among the young. And also, I think he gave a great example in terms of talking about a colleague that founded the organization that if you don't like what you see, well, why not create your own organization that is representative of the diversity that we serve. And then ultimately, Samir talked about not shying away and being positive and assertive in terms of that we're value added to an organization, and that the benefits that we bring to the organization are many. And then ultimately, making the argument in terms of the win-win, right? And how we're going to contribute to the bottom line, right? And so what he talked about is ultimately, there's no other way around. We got to be well skilled in our abilities and knowledge. And as we know, a lot of times we're expected to work double or triple in order to be taken seriously. So I don't think that's changed, but using that as value added. So I really enjoyed the answers provided. The next question focuses on leadership, and this focus is, well, this is what I do. This is my area. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. As all of you know, and I think all of you have taken a leadership course from me, so you're going to have all the answers to this question. But as you know, there are hierarchical, bureaucratic model styles, theories versus egalitarian model styles of leading, and then everything in between, hybrid models, right? What kinds of leadership styles, qualities you feel best advance racial justice, entrepreneurship, and economic empowerment? And we can start with Sean.
So, Dr. Navarez, I do recognize that in answering this question, there's a lot of research to draw on, and I know that there's a lot in the Navarez and Wood book to speak of. And when I think about the answer that just resonates with me at a gut level, knowing that there are many different theories of leadership, knowing that there are different types of management styles that recognize that might be more technical in nature to understanding the different complexity of organizations. One of the first terms that resonates with me in leadership that best advances racial justice, entrepreneurship, and economic empowerment is servant leadership. And the reason why I would say that is because when you are getting into the work, getting into the work of working with communities to uplift, to towards a goal of equity, and a concrete example is for us in the realm of STEAM, science, tech, engineering, arts, and mathematics, knowing that there are youth who don't see themselves well represented in industries. For example, a statistic that stands out to me is Black women are heavily underrepresented in computer science careers, by double-digit percentages. For me, it's servant leadership, where you are working in and alongside and with the people who are doing the work, the communities in which you're working, as opposed to leadership that is from a tower, trying to say, okay, this got to be done, this got to be done, this got to be done. Understanding the work on the ground, understanding the people who are around you, and getting into that work. So leading with, I would say, would characterize for me the leadership style that most advances these causes.
Excellent, thank you. Samir?
I think Sean took my first choice, which is servant, but I want to take it a step further before Dr. Navarez pulls away my doctorate degree. You got to talk about transformational leaders, those who can challenge the status quo and take the baton and move forward. So in terms of taking the servant leaders to the next level, the way I look at it, I think servant leadership is key here, but a special kind of servant leaders. And I always think of because I'm an engineer, I always think of Jaime Escalante and what he did to the math class in LA, and how he took the students from, dropouts and troublemakers into, they didn't even believe that all these kids passed the math exam. So servant leaders who not only, talk the talk, but also are part of that community, walk the walk. They can empathize, sympathize, and actually we're in the shoes of the people they're trying to serve. So my take on it is, it's a pay it forward kind of approach. We can ask for all the programs, we can ask for all the help, but until we have leaders from each communities that can stand up and say, you know what, I am accountable. I want to take the baton. I want to serve my own community. And the examples, even within the Sacramento area, you see, different communities that I talk to in the South Side, where people, rise and say, I want to take back this community, and I want to be able to go to the park and feel safe and take my kids to the park. And the examples are there. And even in our own community, they're there. So short answer, I think it's transformational leaders, and I think it's special breed of servant leaders who are willing to go back and give back. As Dr. Lawson said, we're giving back by just coming back to the program here.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Lawson?
I feel like I should introduce myself too. Sean and Samir said a little bit more about themselves. So if you don't mind, I'll just take a minute. So
yeah, of course.
As Dr. Navarez was saying, I was part of the first EDD cohort. I worked at Sac State for 19 and a half years. I worked at Oregon Health and Science University for 3 years, and then I went over to UC Davis and worked there for 6 years. And my career started at San Jose State, actually. So I have over 20 years experience working in academia. And now I work at a nonprofit, Pride Industries, as Dr. Navarez introduced me, which mission is to create employment for people with disabilities. And so I feel very fortunate to be there because one thing about our nonprofit is that we don't have shareholders. So we're actually investing in ourselves and investing in other people. So the money goes directly back to employing more people with disabilities and other barriers to employment. And to me, that's equity, providing people an opportunity, giving them training, giving them development. We have coaches, we have counselors, to work with those who are underrepresented in our communities and give them an opportunity, because we know in this world we need economics. So if you don't have a job, you're not even in the race. So just wanted to start off with that. And then of course, being in the EDD program, our slogan is transformational leadership. And I just want to use myself and as an example. There was a lot of barriers in academia for me to make transformational changes. However, I did make some strides and say that I did have some successes. Now I'm able to make additional, more of an impact because the CEO trusts me with what the work I do in DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if I can just break down that servant leadership a little more, since Dr. Navarez asked a question, what leadership skills, so I could say more than one, right? So just to break down that servant leadership, I would like to say emotional intelligence. We really have to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions. And I had to learn that, and I learned that through academia. If I could say that I'm proud to have had all those years working in academia, because it taught me a lot, and it did teach me how to also recognize and understand and influence emotions of others as well. And then I would like to also include being a person of influence. People have to trust you. So I feel like I'm a person of influence at Sac State, as well as at my company now with Pride Industry. People trust me and they listen to me. Also, it takes humility. I believe that part of being a servant leader is being humble. I think that's what really moves the needle, is when I know I have a doctorate degree. I work at a nonprofit and there's only 2 other people with a doctorate degree. So I don't ask people to call me Dr. Lawson, that's being humble, and being able to be relatable, having an open door policy. Also having courage. I have to have courage in order to address structural racism in the organization that I work in. And so we know that our nation's history and culture is entrenched in systemic racism. So changing the mindsets, changing and challenging programs, policies, and practices in organizations. And this requires transformational leadership. Back to that again. Number one, that's the way we transform organizations, is through policies, programs, and practices. Some people believe practices are actually a policy. Haven't you ever heard people say, we've been doing this for 30 years? It's like, where's the policy? There's no policy, it could be changed, but it's really changing those mindsets. And then I also would like to add a couple of more things to servant leadership, just breaking that down, is resourcefulness. You have to be a person that is resourceful and able to maneuver and not afraid to ask questions and ask people. You never know what you'll get if you just ask, but you have to be a person of resource. And then I also want to add to that, political acumen. You have to have the ability to make good judgments and quick decisions. And I learned that working in academia. You know that, Carlos, Dr. Navarez, we have to, make good decisions really quick sometimes. Also, mentorship and sponsorship. You have to be able to mentor managers and even other leaders. I feel sometimes that I even mentor the CEO of the company in diversity, equity, and inclusion. He depends on me to teach him those things. And also, as a person that's resourceful, and be able to sponsor people, say, hey, you don't always have to do it. You can send someone else to do that. Dr. Navarez is a great role model in sponsoring people to present papers somewhere or be a first author or whatsoever. So I won't prolong it. I know I took a little bit more time, but just to break down, I agree with both of my colleagues, servant leadership and transformational leadership, just kind of breaking those down.
Excellent. Thank you. Comprehensive answer there. And you're right. It's a complex, question, dynamic question, and there's no silver bullet. So the multiple varied answers that you provided talk to kind of approaching it from a very comprehensive, holistic perspective if we are going to make an impact in advancing DEI efforts. So I would say a great answer for that. In terms of, and by the way, we're doing great in time. It's 3:32, so we got another 30 minutes or close to 30 minutes. So feel free to to expand on your answers. And I'm keeping track here in terms of the chat. I don't see no questions, but I'm sure they'll be coming. Now, in terms of summarizing the answers here, Sean talked about definitely a popular leadership approach was the servant leadership approach, right? Where you empower individuals, you meet them at the ground level. And he mentioned this more than once. You're working with, you're visible in their communities. You're working side to side, and I would say that's a great approach, because a lot of times when you do just that as a leader, well, you're at the ground level, right? You understand their sentiments, you understand their struggles, and you're better able to, advance, I would say, their needs, and also know in terms of what areas they need to develop professionally. So, and ultimately that would advance innovation and reaching the outcomes and goals that the organization has made. So I would say, Sean, you're on point with that. And then Samir also focused on servant leadership with the particular focus on transformational leadership. So not only doing the transactional, right, but taking it taking it to scale, in that transformational leadership goes above and beyond what's expected of a member of an organization. So beyond the transactional, in terms of just kind of meeting the contractual obligations, taking it a step further, in that empowering individuals and providing the know-how to, 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 change the organization and be proponents and be agents of change to advance the organization to a point that they hadn't even thought they could do that, right? So, very, very powerful in that way. And then also holding each other, Samir talked about holding oneself or holding thyself, accountable and serving our community. So if it's not happening, then you got to take it upon yourself to be innovative, to represent the communities, particularly if you're in a position of privilege and you have the resources, the means, the know-how. That's very powerful, right? So instead of waiting for others to do it, then and look, face it. I mean, sometimes it's you might being successful comes with some responsibilities and sometimes even a burden, but it is what it is. You got to represent your community. So I think that was a sentiment that, Samir was trying to get across. And then, Dr. Lawson, very powerful. I think, she talked a lot of, provided lots of adjectives, right? In terms of, what skills, what's abilities, what disposition leaders need to have to truly advance diversity, equity, and inclusive, practices and policies and strategies, right? She talked about, and a lot of it, I was trying to, provide kind of broader terms that encompass a lot of her terms that she used. Political leadership, I think it's huge, right? And she talked to that in terms of ensuring that you have the emotional intelligence, right? And that you self-regulate, that you are able to facilitate conflict, right? Conflict resolution is big, and she understands this. Why? Because DEI work is very difficult. So you need to be, multi-skilled, across the continuum of skills that she actually, provided us, right? With the touch of kind of a human relations approach that will allow you to have the courage to fight on and deconstruct and construct new practices that will advance DI efforts. So great, rich answers, provided. Moving to our third question, and I got to give credit here to Dr. Vajra Watson. She actually came up with this particular question, which is, a rich question. A little long for my taste, but we'll work with that. She's on the call, so she'll probably text me right now saying, "Hey, don't diss me here." Okay. So Audrey Lord said that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Can capitalism, equity, and innovation coexist? If so, how? What can be done or is being done in the Sacramento region to seed economic equality and new kinds of jobs and innovative forms of economic development? And we can start with Dr. Batarsi. So
the Carlson Center itself is an example of what has been done in the area. And I know there's a lot of efforts in a lot of the high-tech industries in terms of providing opportunities to level the playing field for everybody. But again, I go back to accountability, and I think there's another quote by the same author, Audrey Lorde. It talks about the sacrifices that are required by the entrepreneurs, because you're risking time, you're risking money, and you're working 100-hour weeks, which actually disconnects you from the same communities you're trying to serve. So this is where, if we're talking about the tools that can help us in terms of within capitalism, I think we need to focus on two things: from the resiliency and persistence, and those tools can overcome any obstacles. The other thing that I see when I mentor people from different backgrounds is the soft skills gap, and I see a lot of it. I see some people even call it the power skills, and those are the skills that differentiate, one engineer, one entrepreneur with some amazing idea from the other. They both can create, they can co-build, they can operate an entrepreneur business. But the way, using those soft skills and how do we provide these tools to dismantle the status quo. And I could think of, one important thing for entrepreneurs and innovators is networking. Know where to go and who to talk to and build that network. And the other one would be interviewing skills. And then the other one is communication skills in general. How do you present your ideas? How do you convince a bank of giving you a loan to come up with capital to take your business off the ground? And that brings me another comment by Dr. Lawson, which is mentorship. And mentorship can provide that needed capital in terms of social and cultural capital and the soft skills needed to dismantle the current status quo.
So how do you, so I'm gonna kind of break the cycle here in terms of the process and ask you a question, Samir. You brought up an important point that a lot of times we're the only one or a small percentage of individuals that reflect of diversity. So, and you're trying to survive, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that it's just kind of survival, let alone trying to take time, to basically, advance and mentor and so forth. I mean, that's kind of a critical balance. How do you go about then while staying sane, and taking care of, the whole emotional wellness in light of, challenges that we continue to experience? So it's easier said than done, right? How do you do that?
I think the qualities that Dr. Lawson mentioned, being resourceful, being a transformational leadership, and viewing the job as a mission, not just a vehicle to provide means to live. I think Dr. Navarez, you're an example of that, and I mean your office is always open to talk about whether it's an assignment or something outside the classroom, or even writing a paper, or so I think that the transformational leader that becomes a servant leader, going back to walking the walk and actually the benefits of giving and the satisfaction of getting back, it takes you much higher on the Maslow pyramid than receiving pay for having a 1 hour counseling with somebody. When you mentor somebody, you're given time, which is the most precious thing you can give as somebody who walked that walk and has seen it before, or suffered before, and sacrificed the time and money and took the risk to become an entrepreneur and succeed.
Yeah. Great point. I think a lot of times you say, I have my plate is full, taking on additional responsibilities would just stress me out even more. But a lot of times, particularly when it comes to serving others and mentoring, instead of adding, you actually get re-energized.
Exactly.
And you're grounded even more, right? And that's kind of the cultural nutrients for you to kind of continue, the work that needs to be had. So, thank you for that information. It's great. Dr. Lawson.
Can you repeat the question, Dr. Navarez?
Yeah, sure. And we can thank Dr. Watson for this question once again. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Watson.
Audre Lorde said that the master's tool will never dismantle the master's house. Can capitalism, equity, and innovation coexist? If so, how? What can be done or is being done in the Sacramento region to seed economic equality and new kinds of jobs and innovative forms of economic development?
Oh, yeah, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
I'll just answer it this way. A lot of organizations are exploiting people. because of the uneven distribution of wealth. We can look at poverty and homelessness and, you know, in our world, or just here in Sacramento, if we want to just stay local. When there's a world and a society that is money oriented, but there's that great divide between the rich and the poor, it really depletes our resources, right? Haven't you heard this buzz about, you know, there's a lack of inventory, right? That's what it is, right? That's part of capitalism. You know, it just goes against having an equitable society. And so let me just break it down into what's going on in Sacramento. And some of you may be familiar with, I'll start off with talking about an anchor institution, which I worked on the Anchor Institution initiative when I was at UC Davis. I know Sac State is part of that, as well as Los Rios Community College. So that's the anchor. You have Sac State, UC Davis, and then Los Rios Community College. And just to let folks know, just in case you're not familiar with what anchor institutions are, but they're enterprises such as universities and hospitals, which is UC Davis Health, that are rooted in our local communities by mission. Invested capital and relationships to customers, employees, and vendors. So these institutions, which is happening now, UC Davis, Sac State, and Los Rios Community Colleges, they're working as strategic partners in order to address challenges that are facing our communities right now. And if they have a commitment to consciously apply long-term economic power of the institution, because we know UC Davis is a $1 billion institution, in combination with its human and intellectual resources to better the long-term welfare of the community in which the institutions are anchored. So that's an anchor institution. So there's a lot of community rallying around Aggie Square, right? And so I think part of your question is, what is Sacramento community doing in order to seed economic equality and new kinds of jobs and innovative economic development? And that's Aggie Square, right? It's an over $1 billion enterprise, in addition to another $1 billion enterprise, which is UC Davis Health, right? That academic medical institution that sits in the heart of this red line zone of Oak Park and Midtown, right? So one thing that Sacramento, the city of Sacramento has done is they have given small businesses grants. However, in order to qualify for this grant, you have to have at least 300 employees and $1 million revenue as that economic boost, right? However, and this would help generate revenue, right, to the city by giving these grants out to these small businesses. But the missing mark is the micro businesses, right? That has less than 300. And we see that a lot now, right? You see the food trucks all over Sacramento. I'm sure they have less than 300, you know, so they don't qualify for these business grants. And, I thank, Sacramento City for giving these grants to businesses, but then we're missing a big gap, right? So that's where we start talking about inequality or a lack of equity in terms of these small entrepreneurs. You can even talk about the neighborhood mechanic, the food trucks, the barber, that owns his own barbershop, or the hairstylist or artists that are now selling their art. And when you talk about innovation, look at the internet. People are selling, you can sell almost anything on the internet now. But is that there's no, is that really stable? Is that really sustainable, right? Is that really sustainable without those grants, without those small business loans? But another thing that Aggie Square is doing is what one of my colleagues were talking about, training. You actually have to have the skill set, right? So one thing that I like that Aggie Square is doing is that they have a construction apprenticeship. So one of my colleagues in the community, actually living in Oak Park, Michael Blair, he's an Oak Park advocate and entrepreneur, as well as a social justice advocate. He has a nonprofit called People Working Together. And if you're interested in look at it, it's just peopleworkingtogether.com. And they're training apprentices right now. They have 20 in their class. Last year, they graduated 90. Some of them have already started working in other places. Another class is starting December 26th, and another 25 or so. But they're seeking apprentice candidates from the Promise Zone zip codes. And you remember about this Promise Zone. So 2 of the zip codes in the Promise Zone is 95817 and 95820. So this apprenticeship usually costs $3,000, but it doesn't cost the students anything now. It's because of a grant they have. So while even in the program, they have resources to help these apprentices while they're in this program, help pay their rent, help pay utility, because they're not getting paid. They give them gas cards and other support services. And so the priority is this zip code. So we're training people who are in these zip codes in the Promise Zone. And then the goal is to actually hire them when it's time for the construction of Aggie Square. So those recruiting efforts are beginning now in the Oak Park neighborhood and also community networks. So let's see, we'll see what I want to say about that.
Adrian,
am I going to? Am
no,
I
that's
too much? Am I too much?
No, that's, I mean, the question talked to a complex answer. You provided, great practical examples. So I really appreciate that. We kind of went from the theoretical and the abstract to the practical, and those examples really
I
help.
just wanted to say that Sacramento, they are doing something with that anchor institution,
Right.
in order to boost our economic development in Sacramento, in order to empower people to have those jobs, because UC Davis is the second #1 employer.
Right.
So they're that economic engine that can help revitalize, and we don't even want to talk about health equity, right? And access to healthcare, because if you don't have health, you don't have anything.
Right. No, great information you provided us. Thank you for that. Sean, so once again, what can be done or is being done in the Sacramento area to seed economic equality and bring about new types of jobs, I would say?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm going to say it's definitely a feat to follow Dr. Batarse and Dr. Lawson. I think the two the responses and the domains of the responses that you gave to the question are just really illustrative. I'm going to talk about maybe a pretty specific lane, and a couple of things that come to mind when we look at the intersection of equity and capitalism and justice, and are that if we are in a situation where we want to make sure that we're promoting equity, and if they have to coexist, I think that one of the things that one of those mechanisms would be the nonprofits and the community-based organizations, which may sound like a like a paradox, but it is an example is not just the type of work that we do here at Square Root Academy, but some of the other innovative organizations that do try to ride on some of the capitalist structures that we have around us, but try to find the best types of partnerships for good. Dr. Lawson, you talked about a construction apprenticeship program. For here at Square Root Academy, we're also trying to do a construction industry related for high schoolers, a workforce development program. And I think that's one of the avenues in which we do that. As well as other programs that are related to building capacity for the workforce in different fields, such as computer science. We've got different partnerships, with different industries and organizations, and a lot of community-based organizations, in the area. I think that's where their intersection, is happening in the Sacramento region. One other thing that I want to say is, another one I'm thinking about is micro actions, that you can take, just in the course of your day-to-day, interactions in an organization. Understanding that, for example, when we're looking at hiring processes, that we recognize that if we have an assessment, if you're in an organization that has an assessment for people coming in, that only tells one part of this, the story and the wealth of the, experience and the diversity, the value that they can bring to an organization. So those are a couple of responses I would proffer.
Excellent, excellent. Rich, once again, rich answers to this third rich question. You did not disappoint. Samir talked about the importance of being resilient, persistent through being dogmatic, the soft skills, the importance of soft skills, right? In terms of being successful and using those skills once they're gained to give back. Once again, I think that's a kind of a constant theme, Samir, across, I would say, your answers to three questions. Dr. Lawson talked about the ugly side of the organizations where, exploitation can take place, but then she finished her statement to this question by, giving us a sense of hope, right? And giving us, practical examples that, advance innovation, economic growth, and give opportunities to the diverse population that we serve. And she talks about grants, talked about apprenticeship. So great, very practical examples. So thank you for that. And then Sean talked about, hey, there's no need to do it alone. This is hard work, right? So, partnering up with other like-minded organizations to build the workforce, capacity of those that need the most advocacy. So once again, rich answers. We're about 3 minutes out here, and I don't see any questions being posed. Maybe just one last thought, if we can kind of go around in terms of, how your thoughts about the panel topic and discussion, and then we can conclude with that. Samir, last thoughts?
One thought I have, should we wait for the annual global week to do this? I think we should not. I would encourage Dr. Watson and Dr. Navarez to keep these panels going year round, and then you have at your disposal all the alumni and the current students from the program that are willing to share some of their lived experiences on the topics.
Excellent. So ongoing. Good. Adrian, what do you have? Last thought?
Well, just appreciate the opportunity to have these courageous conversations. And I think us as leaders, what I've learned is to be more authentic. So, authentic leadership, I think it really brings a sense of humanness to it. We are human. We're not super beings, like you were saying. We get tired too, right? But then we get re-energized once we give and we mentor, because we know that it's going to come back around and we're all on the same page. So I just appreciate the opportunity of having these authentic conversations. And they're hard, but it's necessary.
Excellent. Thank you. Sean, last thoughts?
When we talk about equity and entrepreneurship, I think sometimes juxtaposing the two words together, can be, troubled. And I think that I agree with my colleagues that having these conversations, is important. And I think it sheds light on the idea that there are a variety of tools. There are a variety of things that have been done in a sphere, where we don't have to look outside, the Sacramento region, to think about how we can keep making progress towards these aims. So again, thank you for the opportunity, and also, I mean, I learned a lot just being on the panel and listening to everybody.
All right, great. Well, with that said, once again, thank you. Thank the sponsors, College of Education, Carlson Center, the EDD programs for sponsoring this event. I enjoyed it myself. It was a rich discussion, and thank you, panelists, for taking time to join us. So with that said, session has concluded. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
Dr.
everybody.
Navarez.
Nice seeing you guys.
Moderating the
Thank you.
session.
All right, take care now.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.